a new concept, water credits. Now, why water credits is a context which I thought I'll set in the first place. We have possibly the largest share of population in the world, but we have just about 4% of the world's groundwater. And the real challenge is that over the last 70 years, you will see that the per capita availability of groundwater has actually reduced by almost 1/4. And you can see on the map almost large parts of the country are getting into overexploited zones. Now, one of the challenges is if we continue exploiting the groundwater that's present, we are going to be having a problem very soon in terms of availability of drinking water. But I think it's important to set the context, how the groundwater utilization happens across different segments. You can see that it's about 85% in the farming sector, about 8% in the industry, and the balance is domestic consumption. I represent Bisleri, the largest water brand in this country. And we have two challenges as a business. One is the product itself, which is water. You've seen what the future unfolds for water. The second is our packaging material. And our real actions on this started sometime in 2019-20 when the EPR rules came that you need to recycle 70% at least of the plastic that you put in. And we said, let's not stop at 70, let us try and exceed it to 100. And the year one, we ended up doing 104% of plastic recycling. Now, along with that, we said, if that's possible, then why can't we look at water? And that started the journey where we replenish more water than whatever we extract from the ground. And the entire business model is configured around this because we don't operate these mega plants operating on scale. That means you're depleting the groundwater at much larger scale. You will find it difficult to replenish. So we have about 150 factories closer to the markets, extracting water evenly so you're able to kind of replenish it. Also reduce the carbon footprint that you're closer to the market. Not only that, you can see that every facility has a rainwater harvesting system, and the runoff surface water is captured on premise. We replenish water bodies in the vicinity, and I think over the last 15, 17 years, we have built over 250 check dams, conserving water for the farming community, that their livelihood goes up with water availability through the most parts of the year. And those are two lakes we have restored, one in Chennai, the one on your right side, and on the left is something in Leh, which is at an altitude of about 11,500 feet, feeding the villages in that area. And as we speak, the second lake is under construction. So we have been speaking about water as an issue for us as a business, and one of the discussions I have been having with the chairman since 2019, when I came on board, is that he was always passionate about talking about water credits. He said, carbon credits has become very interesting. It's become almost the norm across the country and the world. And why is it that people are not talking about water credits? So we thought about this for a couple of years. Then we said we have to do something about crafting a framework for it. But as an organization, we don't have the capability. We don't have that understanding. So let us rope in academic people, experts into this, try and understand this better, the entire gamut of carbon credits and the relative application into water area. And if water conservation can be rewarded, what is the method in which can be rewarded? Can a model be developed around it? And that led us to collaborate with Terry, Dr. Arun Kansal and team, fundamentally looking at trying to understand national and international policies on water management, a methodological framework to determine impact-adjusted water footprint, and I'll explain it a little later. Also try and test this concept in 2 units of Bisleri in completely 2 different scenarios, and then provide a toolkit for the industry where it can be adaptable across different industries. Interestingly, we started this project in 2022 November. Interestingly, last year, the Honorable Prime Minister declared Mission Life, the 7 categories on which environmental friendly actions by individuals or cooperatives or corporates would get rewarded on the lines of carbon credits, the framework and the methodology being established, and the platform. Now, for us, it is very interesting because we have just done that work in time. And water sector, this is the definition that the government has given. Conservation, harvesting, and water use efficiency, including reuse, should be rewarded. But obviously, there is an equivalence factor in terms of resource requirement that need to be done. Let me put the context on this. Saving water in a monsoon-rich Kerala versus saving water in Rajasthan need to be rewarded differently. And that's a challenge which we try to understand. So both carbon credits and water credits ideally should provide economic incentives for people to conserve things which are critical for environment. But from a characteristic standpoint, you can see that while carbon is universal, whether we release carbon in India, Singapore is going to get impacted, but water is largely a localized phenomenon limited to what we call as a watershed. And that's the one challenge. Again, depending on the seasons, the water availability and quality had an issue. So you have to factor that in your working. The markets obviously are not established for water credit, but the carbon credit market, which is already established and operating well, gives you a framework to adopt. Now, interestingly, from the Easement Act, going back to the British days, to the latest scenario where water rights and regulations are very disparate across different states. There is no national uniform water policy in that sense. While a lot of attempt has been made to kind of streamline it, and different states have put things together, it is still not a national standard framework. And obviously, to measure savings, you need to have a monitoring mechanism, considering all what you see above. And this is to share with you what is a watershed. It's basically when you're looking at an industry, for example, depending upon where it is located, it needs to be looked at differently. And to define a watershed today, there are advanced technologies available, which we said we should use in our study. The quantum geographic information system and digital elevation model of the US, we use that. We said when we are defining the watershed, let's try and adopt the best global practices. And we went through these 3 concepts. The first one, when we're talking about water audit, is trying to understand our own water efficiency. But the debate was, should the business be just accountable for process efficiency at a unit, or should they have end-to-end accountability of the business and the water footprint that the business creates? Which takes you to the next 2 things, which are virtual water. If I'm using a particular packaging material for selling Bisleri, the water that goes into that packaging material and the production of that, and the transportation to my plants, and the final transportation to my consumer needs to be factored as a water footprint for my business. And that's what you see across the 3 blocks. So accounting for the green water, suppose I was using something which a product related to agriculture was being used in my formulation. Then the green water which is embedded in the soil, I need to account for. The surface and groundwater, and if I'm using effluent treatment, then the gray water will need to be accounted for. Now, when we did this study, we also found out that globally there were interesting models which were there. China, Kenya, and Morocco are the 3 countries which have done some amount of work on this. Fundamentally trying to understand trying to retain the runoff surface water, recharge the groundwater, and curb the sedimentation in reservoirs. I mean, I was just listening to the conversation in the previous session. These people have also done, the downstream beneficiaries have created an investment fund to benefit the farmers, because the farmers' initial investment versus returns are going to be, there's going to be a gap. So this investment fund was going to bridge that gap for the period in the early settling time. So this is what our water footprint study was, covering the operational water footprint, the overhead operational water footprint of the plants or the facilities, the supply chain water footprint, and the overhead supply chain water footprint. We took only energy in this because your warehouses were very disparate across different places. So we took two plants. One is the water scarce area in Sahibabad. The only water body was the Ghazipur drain transporting the drainage of the Delhi city. And you had a water sufficient area, Kamshet, near Lonavla, where there are lakes and rivers nearby our plant. You can see that this is the final summary. I've just put the Sahibabad study over there. You can see 84% of the production related water consumption was compensated by harvesting of water at the plant itself. You can see the green dotted place. But we have also taken the ingredients and the packaging, which is the virtual water that's got captured. So the other two findings which we have in this was that if I use solar energy, my water footprint comes down by almost 6%. And I have these glass bottles which you find on the table made in Sahibabad. If I were to convert them into PET, then my water footprint of Sahibabad comes down by 17%. So there is a trade-off. When I'm using glass, you can see that the water footprint actually goes up. Now, that's a formula for working. Don't fret over it. We have got it on our website and the Terry University website. So to create a final 1 liter of Bisleri, normally at the factory, I require 1.08 liters because I have a 92% efficiency in terms of conversion. But when I account for the entire full line from packaging material to reaching to the distributor, I require almost 14 liters of water at Sahibabad and about 10 liters of water in Kamshet. So that's really the cost of a product in the true sense, the water footprint. And you can see if I were making a soft drink, including the gray water and the green water, which is related to the sugarcane, you will notice that I would have required 50 liters of water to produce 1 liter of a soft drink. And I've used public domain information, the study which has been done by them themselves. So these contrasting scenarios really highlight the fact that if water credits were to become a reality, you require a watershed specific estimation, which I'm sure, along with the government authorities, we can kind of define those watersheds. You will also notice that organizations need to be accountable beyond the fence, because within the fence consumption of the water footprint is hardly 9%. Now, this is the reflection also for us, because when we looked at this data, we said, if 91% is outside, I think it's time we reflect upon our supply chain configuration and try and reconfigure it in a manner that significant improvement can be done to reduce the water footprint. So both scarcity factor and the deprivation factor are accounted for here. Also, you are getting the benefit of the conservation efforts. If you're harvesting water, if you're building reservoirs nearby, building, let's say, water bodies in the vicinity, in the watershed, you get the benefit for it. So we created this template now. This is something which is adaptable across industries. You need to put these calculations pertaining to your operations and you get your water footprint. So in summary, it's about impact adjusted water footprint as the basis for calculating the savings. And we need to establish the baselines for different kinds of industries because different industries consume water in different ways. Cap and trade mechanism possibly might be a useful thing in this sector. And define the monetary value of a water credit. It will kind of motivate people to save water because then they can possibly trade that savings like carbon credits. There might be requirements in financing water credits. If people have to save, the initial conservation cost would be there. If there could be funding agencies who could step in, I'm sure it can become a big movement. For people like us, if we are a responsible organization, then can water sustainability-based label declarations be allowed by the government? That will become a green point for us, that I'm actually buying a product from a company which is responsible about water consumption. Obviously, the regulatory and the compliance mechanisms need to be put into place. And not to miss out, there is a huge social justice factor around water. And we need to be sensitive about that in a country like India. So we should prevent the overexploitation, because if people start seeing that there's a good avenue to make money, they should not end up at the cost of somebody else and making their lives miserable. And finally, 85% of the water consumption or the groundwater extraction happens in agriculture, and it is time for us to actively think about looking at water-prudent crops and water-efficient cultivation methods. So thank you, and with this, we release this book, and we are dedicating this to the country. It's a very detailed scientific book, but being a marketing company, we have illustrated to make it an easy, interesting reading. And it's available on our website and the TERI website, and we are in discussion with the government to see if these models can become useful inputs for establishing something called water credits. We depleted 25% of the groundwater in the last 70 years. Can we turn it around in the next 70 and become surplus?